All right, YouTube, this is Detroit's HPTV coming to you on this Tuesday morning, back with another video. We got to talk about it. So the Supreme Court has sided with Donald Trump under about the deportation under the 1798 Enemy Aliens Act. And the left is mad because they said, well, that law is over 100 years old, almost 200 years old. But it's not as old as the U.S. Constitution. This is the oldest law in America, the United States Constitution. So if the law is still on the books, it hasn't been overturned, then it's still the law. But what they would have you believe is that Donald Trump is not abiding by the Constitution, but the Constitution directly gives him the authority to enact the 1798 Enemies Alien Act. Now, there's also the Supremacy Clause, which means that federal law supersedes state law, and Donald Trump is also head of the federal government. So really what it is virtual signaling and is narrative shaping, because they know most of the American people will talk about the Constitution and say that they live in a democracy, but really they live in a constitutional republic, which the Constitution being the supreme law of the land, which under Article 6 and Article 6 courts gives the federal government supremacy over state legislation and state laws. So they're gaslighting the public. They're gaslighting the public about the tariffs. Donald Trump is saying he's not going to tax the American citizens. He's saying he's going to use the tariffs so that America has an equal footing in the global economy, so that we are really not in competition with China anymore, because we're China's biggest market when it comes to imports. But it's ironic that these liberals on the left will advocate so hard for illegals, but they don't fight this hard for the American citizens. You know, they always talking about protect women. But have you noticed they don't do any protection of women? In Detroit the other night, they found a grandmother, a daughter, and a granddaughter burnt alive on the west side of Detroit. Think about that. A grandmother, a daughter, and a granddaughter, 9 years old, found unalived and set on fire. Before that, the Naziah Harris story out of Detroit. So at what point do we realize that they care nothing about the interests of their people and constituents? It's all about politics with them. It's all about power and control. It's all about manipulation, virtual signaling, race hustling, race baiting to mislead the uninformed people. And they was out there protesting. And we know that the main reason they was protesting is about gender. Gender reaffirming care, non-binary, LGBTQ. But at the same time, they're fighting anything that will help the common man move forward in a way that he can create generational wealth. So I want you to check out these two clips and stay for the last one, because CNN and the left, they were having a problem because they lacked so-called masculinity in the Democratic Party. So they went and got Van Lathan. And I want you to hear him talk as if he's a lawyer. He knows anything about the Constitution, but all he's doing is reading the company line, issuing out Democratic talking points. But at the same time, the communities that they claim to represent and care so much about are in total chaos. I just told you in Detroit, a grandmother, her daughter, and a 9-year-old granddaughter were found burnt alive in a car. You don't hear about that nationally. You didn't hear about The Nazaire Harris case, naturally, except for the bloggers and social media. See, social media is overcoming and taking the place of mainstream media and legacy media because their narrative is so slighted in a way that is really not even news. It's all propaganda. So without further ado, I want you to watch these clips with me. Watch this first one with Gayle King. Oh, this is for fair usage under the 1976 Copyright Act for education and commentary. Let's get to it.
A major decision from the U.S. Supreme Court on President Trump's immigration policies. This has to do with the use of an 18th century law to deport migrants without due process, including to a notorious prison in El Salvador. Scott MacFarlane is following this story. Scott, good morning. This is still hard to believe.
Hey, Gail, good morning to you. Last night, it was a 5-4 decision that the justices used to stop a lower court's order that was blocking the Trump administration from deporting migrants to El Salvador under that Alien Enemies Act. The court says the administration can resume the deportations using the Wartime Act, which hadn't previously been used since internment in World War II. But the High Court did impose limits, saying the administration will have to begin offering some due process to allow these detainees to challenge the allegations that they're...
I want you to read between the lines. He said some due process. Because they're not naturalized citizens, and because they're over here on visas, which are privileges, they're not the same as somebody who's a freed man. They want to use due process in the 14th Amendment, but the 14th Amendment was enacted to protect the ex-slaves from the Dixiecrats who were lynching them and prohibiting them from making any real free progress. So the federal government enacted the 14th Amendment. They want to use that now to protect immigrants when they don't even use it for the very Black Americans the law was created for. And they want to rage against this administration when Jim Crow Joe and Crime Bill Joe shredded the Constitution. They didn't do tariffs, they did NAFTA, the trade agreement that crippled the Detroit economy and crippled American exports. They created the very situation that we're trying to fight out of, and they're sabotaging at every turn Trump administration ability to bring the country out of this mess that we're in. So let's listen to some more.
Gang members that could take the teeth out of using the Alien Enemies Act, which allowed the administration to expedite the deportations. Writing the lead dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said the court's ruling was giving the government, quote, extraordinary relief, and added the court should not reward the government's efforts to erode the rule of law. The Trump administration's response to the ruling, they called it a great day for justice in America, and Gail, they vowed more deportations are coming.
That's what we keep hearing. One of the deportees is getting a lot of attention. The Maryland man who the Justice Department has admitted this was an administrative mistake. This man should not have been sent to El Salvador. And now, what is Chief Justice Roberts saying about that, about what's going to happen to him?
Yeah, he's going to take a closer look at this case and has ordered new arguments be submitted to him by the end of the day today. A federal judge had set a deadline of midnight last night for the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the administration acknowledging it made a mistake deporting Abrego Garcia with the others. He was protected by a prior court order which prohibited his deportation to El Salvador, from which he'd fled as a teenager. But the administration opposes the lower court order, saying Abrego Garcia is now in El Salvador, which is outside the court's jurisdiction. The Supreme Court has paused the deadline for at least one day, with Abrego Garcia's fate and perhaps those of future deportees hanging in the balance of what the Supreme Court does next. Gail.
Yeah, we keep hearing he's a father of three, a barber. His wife says she's going to keep fighting, and many people say they will keep this story alive. Scott, thank you very much.
I'm going going to do something. I'm going to get super.
Now, again, that was virtual signaling. When they talk about the federal government, as I've told you, the U.S. Constitution gives the commander-in-chief all executive authority. He is the head of the federal government. He is the commander-in-chief of the military. So when you have these liberal Supreme Court justices like Sotomayor, they're just towing the company line. You know, you see the left is so hypocritical. You've seen Jasmine Crockett come out and condemn Byron Donalds of being married to a white woman, but it was okay for Ketanji Brown and Kamala Harris to be married to white men. Everything that you see that comes from the left is hypocrisy. Hypocrisy, virtual signaling, and misinformation. That's why it has always, for the last several years, been called fake news. Now we're going to look at CNN, and I want you to watch Van Latham's, and he's their answer to the lack of masculinity and male representation coming from the left. And I want you to hear his plea or his narrative as it relates to this country.
Weepy-eyed over America right now, something I never thought that I would do on the show. You know, when you look at the...
Now, okay, I'm going to let you hear it, but he sounded like Van Jones. You know, they get these men, they say they weepy-eyed. They want to cry. Want to cry because they're deporting illegal immigrants, but you don't cry for the lives lost in your own communities. In Detroit, so many people lose their lives monthly. Chicago is the unalive capital of the country with these liberal mayors, but they don't cry for the citizens. They don't get weepy-eyed for Americans living in poverty and danger in war zones. They cry for immigrants. They cry for the globalists. They support a new world order agenda. They want chaos, anarchy, so they can institute socialism and communism, but yet they still virtual signal as if they love their country or they respect law. But it's all an act. I've told you before, everything that the left accuses the right of, the left is doing. It's a tactic. They are the ones who want to be fascist and censor. They are the ones who are shredding the Constitution, and they expect you not to know it. So I want you to listen to him explain due process. He's going to try.
I'm going to do something. I'm going to get super weepy-eyed over America right now, something I never thought that I would do on the show. You know, when you look at the Declaration of Independence, it says, you know, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Now, obviously, if you're Black like me, there are problems with the document in terms of the way your people were treated and have been treated here for generations. But it's very important to understand that says men, humans.
I just showed you on the first page of the Constitution, that's the Declaration of Independence. He's chopping and screwing the context because we're not talking about humanity, so to speak. We're talking about law, borders, criminals. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about an invasion. How many of you out there really don't believe that there are sleeper cells all through this country? Sleeper cells. Enemy aliens, literally. Y'all forgot about 9/11? Under the Biden administration, they let 20 million unvetted people in. Most of them men of military age and fighting age, along with gang members, all into this country. And they're everywhere. And a lot of you don't even realize that there is a war going on. This country is at war. So why would you have enemy aliens and illegal people that you haven't even vetted and you don't even know who they are just roaming through this country? But see, if something happens, like another 9/11, or what happened in the Boston Marathon, or something like that, you're going to say you're not protected. Remember I just told you what happened in Detroit? And black women, they say they're not respected or protected. Where is the outrage or outcry for a grandmother, her daughter, and her granddaughter? See, black lives only matter on the left when it could be monetized, when they can monetize trauma and virtual signal. But think about who they are really protecting.
It doesn't say Americans. It says that our entire way of life, our entire government is undergirded by a belief in human rights. Meaning, if you happen to find yourself in America, then you are entitled to treatment that is different than if you find yourself in China or.
He's lying. He's quoting the Declaration of Independence, right? How many of you guys out there really know what the Declaration of Independence was about? It was about taxation without representation in the colonies and breaking away from a monarchy in England. It was not about having further open borders and more enemies while the Patriots fought England. He's chopping and screwing it. Because even when he talks about this history and he's saying the Declaration of Independence, in 1776, what was going on with black people? What was going on with black people? Oh, yeah, they were in slavery, right? And then the Enemies Alien Act didn't come to after slavery, as I've told you, to protect the freedmen from the Dixiecrats, from the Democratic Party, who got so angry that they couldn't keep their free labor, that they not only created the Ku Klux Klan, they assassinated Abraham Lincoln. These people are so mad about losing their cheap labor that they're throwing this country into chaos and misrepresenting all the facts. Let's listen to some more of this nonsense.
In Russia or in Germany in 1939 or any of those places, that we have a specific belief in human rights and the value of a human person. That means that we are not going to send you to a torture chamber without due process, and we're not going to subvert the rule of law to dehumanize you. Amen. And that has to mean something. And if it doesn't mean anything, then we lose our entire way of life and who we hope to be at some point, even if we haven't been that person in the past. And I just think everybody who's talking about whether or not this guy is American or not, or how he was here, or like what he means, just sit back and think about who it is that you want to be. And that's not who we want to be.
If you're standing on American soil, you're allowed to claim asylum. And the scariest thing is that how can El Salvador ever let this man back? We paid them $20,000 to take him. No one comes out of this place because you think El Salvador? And I've been to El Salvador. I've done...
These are the same people that would advocate for letting Al-Qaeda in the country. Have y'all forgotten 9/11? I'm reminding you again. They had foreign nationals taking flight lessons for planes and wasn't even learning how to land the planes. So, I mean, it sounds good on the face of it, but these people are weak and corrupt, and they don't want what's best for you. Van Lathan is weepy-eyed over deportations, but he's not weepy-eyed over the violence and destruction in the black community. Really?
Stand up there because we have troops there, because we're still doing the drug war there. The drug war is still in progress. I played at military bases in El Salvador. They're not going to let this man out to come talk to American media about what conditions are like in there. And this man has a wife and kids. He has an autistic son, and we have renditioned him. like it's 20 years ago, to a gulag for torture with no plans to get him back.
Stephen Miller calls the judge a Marxist judge who now thinks she's the president of El Salvador. I mean, I guess I'm not surprised anymore about rhetoric, right? But it's not really how our system works. If you disagree with the judge, just appeal it, like the Trump administration actually did.
Well, so this whole thing is really unusual to me because they launched like a PR campaign against this specific person, saying he's an MS-13 gang member, like for weeks. Like JD Vance got involved, the press secretary, and they've really gone hard on him. But yet the DOJ attorney who was prosecuting this case basically said, well, we don't really have anything on him. So why wouldn't the DOJ attorney in DHS, who says he's an MS-13 gang member, have done their due diligence?
Administrative error.
DOJ said they had admitted they'd made an administrative error by sending him there. So it's like the administration's not even talking to each other.
They have a vested interest in leaving these borders open. The Democrats wanted that voting bloc, even if it cost us our entire communities, even if it cost us our lives. They don't talk about Lincoln Riley. They don't talk about none of the violence that came along with that open border. They virtue signal and they misrepresentate the facts to you about the Constitution, the law, the government, everything. And they stir up the emotions. You had people out there protesting with signs that say, take your hands, Elon, off my Social Security. How many of you really believe Elon Musk is trying to steal your Social Security check? You really believe that? He's doing an audit, the most scrutinized person on the planet at this moment, and he's trying to steal your Social Security check. Why are they telling you that? Do you guys know anybody who hasn't gotten their Social Security check? I want to know. Or is everything they're telling you is to fearmonger and to get you emotionally attached to an agenda that you don't understand anything about? But the Supreme Court, they ruled on Trump's side because it was the law. No matter how old it is, it's still on the books. So that's all I have for you this morning. This is Detroit's HPTV coming to you out of Detroit. Like, share, subscribe, support the channel. Salute to all patriots. And as always, keep your head on a swivel. Peace.